So here we are in chapter 24, the very end of the parak, and we learned already last time that there's something in the interaction between Yitzchak and Rivka that has a certain inherent distance and awe that pervades the atmosphere, according to some. But on the level of pshat, she sees him, she's wowed, she falls off the camel or jumps off the camel, but the pole implies falling. And she asks, who is this person? She covers herself already. In verse 66, the Eved is explaining to Yitzchak everything that happened. And just look at verse 66, pasuk samach vav, vayisaper ha'eved liYitzchak et kol advarim asher asa. What a beautiful coda to the rest of Perek Chaf Dalet, where we heard not once, but twice what happened. Can you imagine if the Torah would have, it's counterfactual, imagine if the Torah now had repeated again the entire story of Eliezer Eved Avram telling Yitzchak, do you know what happened? And this happened and that happened. Why isn't it repeated again? It's not repeated again because there wouldn't be, I imagine, anything new in this retelling than the first time the retelling happened in the home of Bituel and his family. The point is, and this just underscores the point again and again, Yafes sichaten shel avdei avot yoter mitoratan shel banim. Greater on a certain level or nicer is the story and the conversation of the avadim, of the servants of the forefathers, even more sometimes than the Torah of the children. Meaning we have all sections of Torah from perspective of observance that are whole swaths of learning. Think about Shabbat as an example. Think about various elements of Eruvin, etc. All sorts of things that are not related in the Torah Shebechtav. We know about it from Torah Shebal Peh, and yet it comes to this story. We hear the details in duplicate. The point here, and Rashi just points this out in pasuk Samach Vav. Rashi says, "Gila lo nisim shna asulo." He tells Yitzchak all the different miracles that happened. Shekafta lo ha'aretz shenizdamno Rivka b'tfilato. The way in which the land jumped quickly. That he was able to get from point A to point B so quickly, number one. Number two, that Rivka arrived basically as a result of the prayer. It was so swift. And he tells this to Yitzchak. We don't have to hear again that he tells the whole story because we got the retelling. But the point is, that just reminds us, it could have been a one-liner. Vayisaper ha'eved liBetuel v'Lavan v'Rivka et kol advarim asher asa. Didn't say that. We went through all the details as we did long. And I see your hand, but give me another 2 minutes if you can, just to open up the shir. There were some questions before we started, of course. Your excellent question, Shelley. So let's move a little bit, and then I'll be happy to take questions in just a couple of minutes. He brings her into the tent of Sarah, his mother. This is an incredibly significant closure, of course, on a parsha that began with the passing of Sarah Imenu, and now the next matriarch takes her place. When you look at Rashi here, it's a very well-known Rashi, but I think we should learn it inside to remind ourselves that indeed our view of Tanakh is not exclusively read on level of pshat, but even if we content ourselves here with just level of pshat, the idea that goes from one matriarch to the next. And in fact, as we will see in a few minutes, perhaps, depending on how our discussion goes today, the denouement of the story, the sunset years of Avram Avinu, where things happen that are not covenantal necessarily. But here, this moment is the moment of the passing of the baton. That's what Chazal highlight. Vayviyahu ela v'naseit dugmat Sarah imo. And Rashi quoting from Ma'amari Chazal in various places from Breisheet Rabbah and elsewhere. He brings her into the tent. She became in the manner of, she inherited the mantle of basically Sarah, his mother, Klomar, Bahare, he, Sarah imo. Behold, she, Sarah, Rivka rather, is his mother Sarah. It's not an Oedipal statement, but it's a statement of a covenantal transfer that's taking place here. And the symbolic import of Shekol Zman, Shesara Kayamet, as long as Sarah Imenu was alive, Hayanir Daluk, there was a candle that burned, Me'erev Shabbat Le'erev Shabbat. The Shabbat candles, as it were, went from one week to the next. Ubracha Metsuya Ba'isa, there was a blessing in the dough, meaning in the challah, in the bread that was baked. And thirdly, ve'anan kashur al ha'ohel, and there was a cloud that was tethered to the tent. Umishemeta, when she died, pasku, these things ceased. Uchshabat Rivka chazru, when Rivka arrived, these three things came back. And he says, I'm quoting it from a Breisheet Rabbah. And the idea here, of course, that these are three symbolic elements that represent the relationship on one level between husband and wife. On another level, there's a covenantal import here, right? So just reading the notion of candles and challah and the anan kashur lahar, reflecting the notion of Shabbat, right? The notion of Shabbat and those elements being on Shabbat. By the by, when you connect this very easily, it's connected. You see, this is definitely what Chazal thought, not only because it says it here, but remember what we said when Sarah Imeinu passed away? We said that there was a eulogy that was delivered that, according to the Medrash Tanchuma, is actually the eulogy spoken by Avram Avinu at the place of Kiryat Arba, there at Mar Machpelah, which would later on be inscribed in the book of Mishlei in Perek Lamed Aleph, which we call the Perek of Eshet Chayil Miyimtza. And that Eshet Chayil, that prayer that was recited every Friday night, right before the Kiddush and the Hamotzi, in the presence of the candles, is about Sarah Imeinu. It's a beautiful idea. And that's what our tradition teaches us about the sort of the provenance of it. We've spoken many times about the idea that tefillot, oftentimes that are folded into later books, may have had an oral tradition earlier. To cite just a couple of them, Tefillah Moshe, the prayer of Moshe, that appears in the book of Tehillim. The Gemara says, yeah, because chapter 90 through 100 includes it, so 11 chapters are actually written by Moshe Rabbeinu. Why isn't there a book of Tehillim by Moshe? Because he didn't write it down. There were scrolls, there was whatever, there's a tradition. Who actually inscribes it? So David HaMelech writes it, he puts it in, whether he puts it in or he actually physically writes it out and says, this is going to be in my book. Either way, Chizkiyahu and his Bezdin, we know, redact Sefer Tehillim. It says so in the Gemara Masechet Bava Batra, right? So a later king of Judea, a direct descendant of David HaMelech, makes it into the Sefer that it is called Sefer Tehillim. And there are other sections that are in there as well, Mizmor Asaf and Lantzech al Shminit and Lantzech Mivnei Korach, different prayers. They all made it into Sefer Tehillim. Another example, at the beginning of Sefer Shmuel Aleph, we have a prayer that Chana recites in Perek Bet, in the second chapter, Alatz Libi, expressing elation and great dependence and thanksgiving to the Almighty for what happened regarding the birth of Shmuel. But there are those who point out, Rav Amnon Bazak, Mishivat Har Etzion, others point out, it's not for sure that she made up the tefillah right then and there and it was written in the Sefer Shmuel. It could be that that's what happened. Al Pi Ruach HaKodesh, she was, after all, Chana, the mother of Shmuel, and we learned so much about tefillah from Chana, Vide, the Gemara Masechet Brachot, but also look up the idea that perhaps this was a tefillah that was known, that other people recited before, was sort of part of the tradition, and maybe it was a battle hymn of a sort. If you look at some of the language there in Shmuel Aleph, not 100% clear that it had to have been written Davka by Chana. Could be, but some of the imagery in there and maybe about wars and something like that. And we get this idea, and that gives us an idea as well. When we read Tehillim and we're reading about David HaMelech saying, God is my light and my salvation, Hashem Ori v'Yish Mi'ira, right? Going out to war, if a camp is arrayed against me, I'm not running prosecuting a war personally. Maybe live at a time when Jewish people don't have an army or something. So is that an irrelevant chapter of Tehillim? No, just you're applying it within your own life, your own context. To bring it full circle, Yitzchak Avinu brings Rivka Imeinu into the tent of Sarah, is symbolic. They're building a new Jewish home, but it's a continuity of everything that came before. Anan Kashur Alahar, the third element, is the divine presence in the home. And the idea that there's the Ruchniut, the notion of the Anan Kashur. Remember, there is a cloud tethered to Har Hamoriah. Remember, it's in the Pshat, chapter 22. So Chazal want you to know there was a cloud tethered to another place in the world, not just on Mount Moriah, but on the tent wherever Sarah Imeinu lived. the matriarch of Klal Yisrael. That's Davka, where there was a divine presence. One last point, and I'll take some questions, comments, etc. And that is that, of course, these three elements are symbolic of three aspects of basic Jewish observance. I didn't make this up. I don't remember. I think one of the Rebbes, the Hasidic Rebbe said it. Maybe it's earlier. I'm not sure. But the idea, of course, that the Ner Daluk me'erev Shabbat l'erev Shabbat means the observance of Shabbat, lighting Shabbat candles, bringing Shabbat into the home. A bracha mitzuya ba'is, the blessing in the bread. We think of it as challah on Shabbat. That's traditional. Women bake for Shabbat, chalot, etc. But perhaps it means the blessing in bread all the time, meaning that there are mitzvot having to do with food, with kashrut, Shabbat and kashrut. The anan kashrut al ahar is a soft, euphemistic way for referring to the idea that God's presence, ala ohel, excuse me, not the har, but the ohel on the tent, is a soft way of describing the notion of the privacy between husband and wife, the notion of intimacy, the notion of Torah mishpacha, family purity, as an element and an aspect, a core element. These are the three elements, of course, that were always the mainstay of Jewish observance. Shemer Shabbat, Shemer Kashrut, Shemer Torah mishpacha, all of these elements vital, and all of them in the persona of and embodied by Sarah and Avraham, of course, but vested in a certain way of a Masorah, vested much more in Sarah Imenu, maybe in a certain way than the covenantal role of the fathers was a covenantal role of the mothers. Rav Soloveitchik, Zechat Tzadok Kodesh Uvracha, oftentimes spoke about this idea, about the covenantal role of Sarah Imenu. His essays on the subject, you can look at them, I'm sure they're online, some such thing, maybe send it out sometime, but that's the idea. When Rivka Imenu arrives, so that's on one level, that's the confirmation that she's the right one. But at another level, it's the idea that Yitzchak is now with Rivka taking over the mantle. You know, the cloud is back. And imagine the solace and comfort that Avram Avinu takes to see that even over, unfortunately, the loss of Sarah Imenu, he's now can enjoy recognizing that the torch was passed. Now, we're not talking about Avram Avinu yet. We're going to get to that. We're not up to that yet. But the whole idea that it describes that he brought her into the tent of his mother, and of course, Rashi writes, Derech Eretz Kol Zman She'imo Shel Adam Kayemet Karuchu Etzla. As long as the way of the world is, as long as a person's mother is alive, he is beholden to her, or he follows after Mishemeta Umitnachem Beishto. When she leaves the world, so he's comforted by his wife, i.e., that the values are transferred, etc. And like that, we move to the next whatever the word is, the next leg of the journey. By the way, as I'm saying, my eye just looked down for 1 second. I made a mistake. Chizkuni already says the idea about a non-kashrut dugmat nida, shinun shalem posek b'shuv choser. The notion of the cloud is related to Torah mishpacha, etc. Okay, let me pause here. This was a big mouthful. And we take some questions, comments. Shelley, your hand is up mysteriously. Go ahead.
Yes.
Unmute. I don't hear you yet.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Now I hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. There's 2 points. One with the one is a comment about how these things could have all been. They didn't have to be written down. They were oral. We tend to forget, especially since the printing press, but especially nowadays in affluent times with all these books behind you and stuff like that, that in the old days, people learned things by memory. They would know things by memory.
Yes.
Little was written down. So therefore, we learned in a totally different way in those days. So it makes perfect sense that the things were always there, but that we don't tend to necessarily remember stuff. We expect to not forget the books nowadays. You expect to look it up on your computer or phone.
Right.
Okay, but verse 6, my original question is verse 66. Which version did the Eved give to Yitzchak? The first version where it happens, or the second version where it's toned down for the family in Betuel? It would seem to me it would be the first version.
Yeah.
But it could be either.
Yeah, I think I could be either. It could be either. It could be either.
Do any of the commentators say anything?
No, I didn't see. It doesn't mean that no one says it. I didn't see. A great point. Stands to reason it was the first version. Like, he doesn't have to tone anything down. This is his master's son, and he obviously he didn't have to censor what happened, and he was talking to a kindred spirit. Certainly, according to all of the traditions that we have, already sourced in Chazal, which has halachic import, I might add. It's not just a historical note, has halachic import, that Yitzchak tikein tfilat mincha. Right? He was the one who enacted the prayer of mincha. And then you look up the Gemara in Yuma and Chavchet, and it points out, well, did Avram Avinu also daven mincha? Yes, he did, but it was ascribed to his son. Even though Avram Avinu did it, he's associated with Shacharit, and Yitzchak is the one who gets credit, so to speak. It's associated with him, with his life and the like. And therefore, you might say Suach Basadeh is not simply hanging around, having conversation, but actually engaged in prayer. And therefore, for Eliezer to come back and to tell him the whole thing was miraculous from the beginning, and the way that the tefillah happened, etc. It's all, it's all connected. It's one. It's part of a continuum. I think it makes sense that would happen. Makes sense. By the way, on a halachic level, I should have probably said this at the beginning. On a halachic level, the Eved Avraham, by giving the gifts to Rivka, engaged in kiddushin kesef. But then what Yitzchak Avinu does is nisuin, knisa lebeito, taking her into the home. This is what happens at a wedding today. Go to a wedding, the giving of the ring, that's the kiddushin al kesef, giving of the gift. And then the bringing into the home is variously, depending on who you ask among the Rishonim, the chuppah itself, which they're already standing in that context, or the yichud room. Could be either of those, where they retire to immediately after the ceremony, and that's the kiddush and nisun. And you see these two phases are actually right here, right? So just interesting to consider this, this notion, and the idea, of course, also that Yitzchak Avinu, who represents on a certain level, or comes to represent a certain otherworldliness to him. Normally compliment someone to say they're worldly. He's otherworldly, right? He's out. He's by Lasuah Basadeh. He had this experience with the Akedah, obviously, and now he brings her into the tent, and right away the reaction based on Chazal is all these different spiritual things. The candle burns again. The bread has blessing in it. Right, the tent has the cloud on it. These are different simanim, sort of confirmatory simanim, that even in the moment of, you could say, what's the word? In the moment that is a very the notion that from a physical perspective, from a gashmi perspective, from a mortal perspective, he brought her into this tent. But the reaction, if you will, had all of these different elements that were nisiim. They're miraculous in nature, and ruchaniim, and spiritual in nature. So just to consider, that component. Okay. I have much more to say on the subject, but I'm trying to figure out how much more we want to say on the end of chapter 24, or whether we should already break into chapter 25. I'll just point out one other layer. It's not really a layer, but it's another sort of like element about where you could see already on the level of pshat, perhaps, something about the notion of Yitzchak as being extremely prayerful, and what this moment means, based on just on the level of pshat. So if you look at verse 63, pasuk samach gimel, it mentioned by Yetze Yitzchak lasuach basadeh lifnot arev. He went out to converse in the field, right? And the notion of sicha is tefillah. Rashi quotes from a pasuk in Tehillim. But if you look back at the beginning of the Torah in chapter 2, in Parak Bet, you'll find the following pasuk right at the beginning, really, of Parak Bet, where it describes the creation of verse 4, chapter 2, verse 4. Eila toldot hashamayim v'haaretz bihi am b'yom asot Hashem Elokim eretz v'shamayim. So these are the chronicles, the genealogy of the heavens and the earth in their creation, when they're created. on the day that Hashem fashioned or made Hashem God made the earth and the heavens. Then verse 5. V'chol siach hasadeh terem yiyeh ba'aretz. V'chol esev hasadeh terem yitzmach. So v'chol siach hasadeh, that's the word lasuach, siach, right there. Yeah. Literally, it means the various trees, the vegetation, the growth. V'chol siach hasadeh terem yiyeh ba'aretz. And all of the grasses, the herbs of the field before they grew. Because God had not caused, Hashem God had not caused to rain down yet. There was no rain. The Adam ayin la'avod et ha'adama. And there is no person to work the land. There's no person there to work the land. Could also be to serve in some way, right? So there's an idea here that there's a hint in these very words that rain had not fallen. Chazal, this idea that we have here a location and it does not yet have rain. And why doesn't rain fall, right? The rain doesn't fall because there is no person yet to daven for it. There's no one who has needs as such, and therefore there isn't a rain that falls down. We learn instead, there's a mist of some sort, an ether, as they would sometimes call it in yesteryear, in order for there to be rain. And if you look at Rashi there, chapter 2, verse 5, so he gives you a mix of the level of pshat and on the level of medrash. What he considers though to be pshat and his level. In Dibur HaMatchil ki lo himtir. Umatam lo himtir. Why didn't it rain yet? Lefisha adam ayin lavodat ha'adama. There's no person yet to work the land, to cultivate it. Ve'ein makir b'tovatam shel gshamim, and no one to recognize the goodness of rain. Uchsheba adam v'yada shehem tzorach la'olam. Once a person came and knew that there was a need for them in the world, hitpalel aleihem v'yardu. He prayed for them and they fell. V'tzamchu ha'ilanot v'hadshaim. And then the trees and all of the grasses began to grow. This is, of course, not the same story as we read in Perek Aleph. In Perek Aleph, everything just is created by Hashem and it works, so to speak, on its own. There's something called Teva. Hashem made it. Teva, like matbeya, a coin. It's minted. It goes. It's a system, right? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Borei Olam, and that's his role. Get to Sefer Breisheet, Perek Bet. We're learning that the human being, right? It's the same story told from another perspective of human beings at the center, and the notion that tefillah is so incredibly important, and that is its main expression is in the prayerful dimension. It comes along Yitzchak Avinu, and he's praying. Recall that when we learn about Yitzchak arriving here from the field, we've actually not heard a word from Yitzchak Avinu since the Akedah, where spiritually, not physically not a scratch, but from a ruchani perspective, we talked about, based on the Pirkei of Eliezer, not the pshat, but in the level of Medrash, that his neshama left the guf and it came back in, sort of the recreated human being. And how appropriate that he's the person, by the way, he's a person later on will be involved in planting and working the land in a way that his father Avram was not. Avram has a nomadic quality to him. He has fields with sheep grazing in them, but he's not actually, and he does plant, the Eshel, but he's not, right? As opposed to Yitzchak, who we'll learn in Parshat Toldot, is Vayizra. He's planting things, he's digging wells, he's working the land, right? He lives in a more agrarian, more agrarian lifestyle, more rooted in the ground. Vayetze Yitzchak lasuach basadeh lifnot arev. He's davening, he goes out to this field. He's more connected in that way. He's coming from Be'er Lachai Ro'i, right? And the idea that he goes with Sarah Imenu, with Rivka Imenu, Dugmat Sarah Imenu, back into the tent. So the return back to that place. And if this was a Hasidus shir, if it was, which it's not, but if it was, it'd be a great time to say that Rabbi Nachman Breslover, very famously, quoting from earlier sources, didn't make it up, but he popularized it, that the gate to Gan Eden is Mar HaMachpelah. So you understand, this is like the idea that there in the place where he's going to meet Rivka, he's going to go up to, sounds like he's going back up to Hebron, to the tent of Sarah Imenu, and that's where he's going to establish, that's the home, is right there at the gate, right outside of Gan Eden. Yeah, the return as such. Okay, let me pause there and back over to whoever else has their hand up. Shelley, again, please.
Okay, this is a good time for me to ask a question that's been bothering me all throughout COVID when I'm sitting at home davening by myself. The Haya Im Shemoah uses the word that you said is used in chapter 2 in Breisheet, matir, for rain. Now, when
matar, yeah.
Matar, when we say right before, oh, now I forgot it. Why is it matir instead of geshem?
Matar is a type of rain, let's say. Yoreh is the early, Malkosh is the late rain. Lahamtir is something that comes down. That's the idea. Now, why did he use the word geshem? That's more of a question for Perek Bet and more of a question for Sefer Dvarim. I don't want to go into it at the moment. It's going to take too long. But it is an important question, right? Why didn't it just say geshem? But it did not. And of course, like everything else, it's omni-significant. It just happened.
Rabbi.
Helen, go ahead, please.
Okay. In modern Hebrew, if you were to invite somebody into your office, you'd say, "V'vakasha lehikanes, v'natchil et ha-sicha." So a sicha is always a back and forth situation. It's never a soliloquy. So it's very unique to say a sicha. It's a special kind of dialogue, not monologue.
Tefillah is a dialogue.
But sicha is a conversation.
Yes.
Both parts. Yes.
So Yitzchak Avinu was engaged in conversation with the Kadosh Baruch Hu.
Right. So you can't really call it a tefillah, although you are saying that is also dually involved. But sicha is a special kind of dually involved.
Right.
In
so
modern
tefillah
Hebrew.
is a conversation. It's not a soliloquy.
It is. What is the root verb of tefillah?
The verb of tefillah,
Yeah,
hey lamed lamed, lifalel. Rav Samson Fall Hirsch writes about this. It means to judge or to introspect in some way, to assess. So lihit palel is to be engaged in introspection, but to understand that there is a dialogue. Tefillah is a dialogue of Soloveitchik. Again,
okay.
I'm very influenced by his thought. I'm the Talmud of his Talmidim, so an aspiring Talmud of his Talmidim. So the idea here that the tefillah of Yitzchak Avinu is a dialogue. Now, when I say it's a dialogue, it could mean that actually, I mean, he's a Navi. Is Hashem talking back literally? He's having nevuah. Yecholiot. I don't have any record of it one way or the other, but it could be. But Rav Soloveitchik was very into the idea that when we daven, it's also a dialogue. Nachon. Another good example. Thank you for having me for a while. Nice to hear from you. 100%. But to appreciate and to realize in a dialogue, two things. Number one, the difference between a dialogue and a soliloquy and a monologue is in one case it's the speech that matters, but not the listener. But if one is listening, they're engaged in the dialogue. They're receiving whatever's being spoken. That's Aleph. But, and this, I don't know the mechanism of how this works. I don't know. Chazal don't know. Nobody knows. It's mysterious to us. But we believe that Hashem is talking back to us. Not talking back to us verbally. We're not Nevi'im. I don't know. I don't want to speak for everybody on this call. I'm not a Navi. But maybe there's someone here who aspires to prophecy. Maybe. But we're B'nai Nevi'im. And we believe, therefore, that there are messages in our lives. And think Rabbi Yisachar Fran had this amazing title of a book. I did not read the book yet, I must say. Maybe one day I'll get to it, which now is kind of dated because I think it came out in like the 80s or the early 90s, something. The title of the book was Check Your Messages. Probably everyone on this call remembers the day before like where you had to like go home and check your voicemail at home because you don't have a cell phone. Check your messages. So just in that title itself, it's like check your messages in your life. Things are happening. You don't always understand why this is happening. It doesn't mean you always understand the messages, but that's tefillah means. Ribono Shel Olam, we're in a dialogue with you. That doesn't mean we come in storming. Anyone who talks the talk of what's the word, stridency, and we're going to storm the gates, we're going to daven, and we're going to force heaven. I don't speak that way. I don't think it's appropriate. You come with your hat in your hand, But Ribono Shel Olam, please, we're begging you, we're asking you, right? But the point of the dialogue is it's conversation for Yitzchak, and this is the point that I wanted to sort of amplify. Give me 1 minute, Shosh. I'll take your point in a minute. Is for Yitzchak Avinu, he's not, and this the Gemara says in Psachim, he's not, he's in a field. He's having a conversation with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Like he's just out there and he's having a dialogue with Ribono Shel Olam. Like he's not in a high mountain, as the Gemara describes, but Avram Avinu saw Hashem always on a mountain. He was in a high place. Now, it doesn't mean Hashem was literally there, but conceivably, the idea is the Anan Kashur al Har. He goes up to a high place. I was davening on the high place, standing Omei Lifnei Hashem. For Yitzchak, he's Basadeh. Whatever's out there, he's in the field. He can find a way to daven, and he has that whatever the word is, certain. Back to the point that I'd made years ago, and Shelley brought up, I think 2 weeks ago, maybe last week, that the Netziv was very into this idea that prayer requires a certain formalism to get us into the mindset, not just stam, even though God is everywhere, and just stam, keep talking to Hashem. No, for Yitzchak Avinu, it was much more of he's out in the field and he's either with the trees or the brambles or the open plain, whatever it is. Hashem is there with him, and he's in conversations, the sadeh. And of course, the Gemara in Psachim says, you can find psukim that also refer to Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh, it's the sadeh. It's a har, it's the har Hashem, it's the sadeh. And of course, we get the Yaakov, that's the balance between the two. That's the bayit. We're not up to Yitzchak yet, but we'll get there. Okay, Shoshi, go ahead, please.
Wait, I got one other thing.
Okay, Helen, one more thing. Shoshi will have to wait another half minute.
No. I just want to for Helen. Helen, what you said was very, very good because it says it in the pasuk. You are exactly right.
Oh.
He went to his comfort zone to daven, if not Erev, and Hashem answers him. How?
Very good. And he sees right away. He's davening for shidduch, and boom, there it is.
It's a sikha. They're having a conversation.
Beautiful.
Very nice. Okay, I have one other thing.
Please.
Thursday, it was fortuitous. Our Haftorah was about Shlomo and the Beis Hamikdash.
Yes.
So it was very providential that the Haftorah stood in your place.
Thank you.
For Thursday.
I spoke about it at Shal Shudas. I spoke about our shir at Shal Shudas on Shabbos, because I said it's very rare that you have the Haftorah Parshat Pekudei falling out, that you actually read the Haftorah Parshat Pekudei. It happens to be Malachim Aleph. That's right. So put in a commercial message. There's no shir this Thursday. No shir this Thursday morning. It's at night at 8 p.m. 8 p.m. on the Megillah, Parshat Zachor, the Megillah, etc. So you're welcome to join 8 o'clock. It'll be in person at Shul and it'll be on Zoom. So come one and all. Okay, one other thing, and it kind of dovetails with what Shoshi just said in response to Helen's point, which is that Yitzchak in Pasuk Samach Bet, verse 62, he's coming from Ba Mibol Be'er Lachai Ro'i. He is, according to Rashi, he's there to bring Hagar to Avram Avinu to get married to him, like he shouldn't be alone, right? Second marriage kind of idea. But it actually doesn't say that he came back with Hagar. So it's worthwhile to at least wonder, does it mean he literally went to go get her? Or does it mean he went there to daven? He davened that his father should get a shidduch, as they say in the Welt. But Chazal have a principle, the Gemara says, right? Kol mitpalel al chaver v'hu tzarich l'oto davar, hunan atchila. If you have something that you need in your life, that's what Chazal say, and you daven for someone else who has that also has that need, and he says, instead of davening for my need, let me daven for the other person's need. You know who'll be answered first? You'll be answered first. That's the Gemara says. Is that not what happened? It's just so beautiful. Again, we'll have to come back next time. We'll discuss, was it actually Hagar, not Hagar? The Mefarshim don't all agree. What do you know? But in Rashi's view, he goes to bring Hagar, and yet, where's Hagar? Why didn't it say? And Yitzchak came from both with Hagar. Because the level of Pshat, Ulai, maybe he didn't bring her at that moment, literally. Maybe he did go, he spoke to her, and he told her, please come, you're invited. But now understand that he went to the well to daven to Hashem. My father is lonely in his house. Maybe there's someone he could still meet. Yes, he's old, but maybe he could still find somebody. Maybe. Hashem, please, you can help. And exactly when he comes back and he's davening there in the field, he sees her coming on the camel. He saw the row of camels. By the way, from afar, he didn't see her. He saw a caravan of 10 camels, or whatever it is, coming. It's 10 camels. Actually says, it's Sirag Malim. So they're all coming. Oh, and that's what happens. And then we only get to Vayosef Av Mikach Isha, Pasuk Aleph of Parak Chaf Hey. That's after. Right? Right? So this is extremely beautiful. And it's not the first time this happened. In fact, and this is one of the reasons why I just think it really sews up a bunch of different things for me about the legacy of Avram and Sarah and Yitzchak and Rivka. If you go back to chapter 21 in Breisheet, Pasuk Aleph, Vashem pakad et Sarah ka'asher amar. Hashem recalled Sarah as he said he would. So Rashi there points out Samach Parsha Zu Likan. It's connected to the Parsha of Avraham davening for the healing of the people in Avimelech's court. Lilamdecha, to teach you, quoting right there from the Sachet Baba Kama Daf Tzadi Bet, Shekol Mevakesh Rachanim al Chaver V'Utzarech L'Oto Davar Hunenet Chila. If you ask for mercy for someone else and you need that same thing, you'll be answered first. That's what Yitzchak Avinu had as his. That was his birthstone, if you will. I'm making this up as I go along. Like mamash, there's no matters like this, but it's anachronistic. Little baby Yitzchak, little toddler Yitzchak is 4 years old, and he's going to sleep, and his mother and his father come to tuck him in, and he says, "Tell me the bedtime story again." And they tell him all the whole story and the whole Maisa with Malachim coming. But then they say to him, you know what the catalyst was the last minute? Was this crazy story that happened with Avimelech. And we davened, and our dear son, anyone who needs rachamim, and if you're mevakesh rachamim for your chaver, for your fellow, and you need the same thing, your tefillas will be answered. And that's, so to speak, the Yitzchak Avinu, one of his bedtime stories, Kiviyachol, so to speak. I made it up. But there is a connection over here. Certainly in the world of Rashi, you come to Perek, Chaf, Dalet at the end. He remembered, and now that my mother's passed away, my father's alone. Why didn't he daven for his own shidduch? He needed a shidduch. Yeah, but that's in the works. Let me daven for my father. And when he did, he came back and he opened his eyes. He lifted up his eyes, and here they are. Adkan for today. Adkan Perek Chaf Daled. Hadron Alach Perek Chaf Daled. Consider that Hadron Alach, but Hadron Chalan. But next time we learn, next Monday, God willing, we'll open Perek Chaf Hey, and we'll see the machloket. Is Keturah Hagar? Is it not? And we'll start to understand a little bit more. So the next chapter of Avinu's life, and on our level, the next chapter as well. That's all we have time for today. Everyone, a great day. Hatzlacha Rabba. I hope to see you soon.